Grace Jenkins had a simple rule: do not fraternize with residents. 6 years of property management had taught her that maintaining professional boundaries kept her job running smoothly. But when she spotted the tall stranger with piercing blue eyes struggling with moving boxes in the lobby of the Westerly, the luxury condominium building, she managed something about him made her hesitate before retreating to her office. "Need a hand?" Grace asked, surprising herself as she approached him. The man looked up, clearly startled by the offer. A genuine smile spread across his face, creating small creases at the corners of his eyes. "That obvious I'm struggling, huh?" "The box labeled books heavy tipping precariously was my first clue," she said, reaching to steady it. "I'm Grace Jenkins, property manager." "Lucas Irving," he replied, extending a hand. "New resident. Apartment 1201. Grace's eyebrows raised slightly. The penthouse had been vacant for months. "Welcome to the Westerly, Mr. Irving. The penthouse is quite impressive. Please call me Lucas." He smiled again, and Grace felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. "And yes, I'm looking forward to settling in. I travel frequently for work, so finding the right home base was important." Grace nodded professionally, though her curiosity was piqued. "What line of work are you in, if you don't mind me asking?" "Investments, primarily," Lucas answered vaguely. "Nothing particularly exciting." If only Grace knew that the man struggling with moving boxes was Lucas Irving, founder of Irving Innovations and self-made Billionaire, who had recently sold his tech security company for billions. Or that he had deliberately chosen the Westerly after reading about its award-winning management under Grace Jenkins, curious about the woman who had transformed the building's reputation in just a few years. "Well, let me help you with these," Grace said, picking up a smaller box. "The service elevator will be faster than waiting for the main one." As they rode up to the 12th floor, Grace explained the building's amenities, completely unaware that Lucas already knew most of the details. What he didn't know was how her eyes sparkled when she spoke passionately about the community garden she'd helped residents create on the rooftop, or how her professional demeanor occasionally slipped to reveal genuine warmth. "Here we are," Grace announced as they reached his door. "If you need anything at all, my office is just off the main lobby. My assistant, Mia, and I are here Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, with emergency services available 24/7. "I really appreciate the help, Grace," Lucas said, watching as she set down the box. "Perhaps I could thank you properly sometime, maybe coffee," Grace hesitated. "That's very kind, but I make it a policy not to socialize with residents, keeps things simpler." She offered a polite smile, "But thank you for the offer." Lucas nodded, respecting her boundary despite his disappointment. "Of course. Professional boundaries are important. I understand completely." As Grace walked away, she couldn't help but wonder why turning down coffee with the handsome new resident left her feeling strangely regretful. Back in her office, Grace pushed thoughts of Lucas Irving aside and focused on her upcoming meeting with the building's ownership group. The Westerly had recently been acquired by Horizon Investments, a mysterious corporate entity that had been buying prime real estate throughout the city. Grace had yet to meet any representatives from the new ownership, and the uncertainty made her nervous. The next morning, Grace arrived early to prepare for the meeting. She had just finished organizing her presentation when her assistant Mia knocked on the door. "The Horizon representative is here," Mia announced, her expression curious. "But it's just one person, not a team like we expected." Grace straightened her blazer and smoothed her auburn hair. "Thank you, Mia. Please show them in." When Lucas Irving walked through her office door, Grace froze in confusion. "Good morning, Grace," Lucas said, his expression calm but with a hint of amusement. "Mr. Irving," Grace replied cautiously, "are you here on behalf of Horizon Investments?" "In a manner of speaking," he answered, settling into the chair across from her desk. "I am Horizon Investments, or rather Horizon is one of my companies." Grace blinked, processing this information. "You're the new owner of the Westerly." "I am," Lucas confirmed. And I apologize for not being more forthcoming yesterday. I prefer to get a feel for properties without the formality that tends to accompany my presence. Grace felt a flash of annoyance despite her professional demeanor. I see. Well, Mr. Irving, Lucas, please. Lucas, she continued, I've prepared an overview of the building's operations and financials, as well as proposals for several improvements I believe would benefit the property. Lucas leaned forward, genuinely interested. I'd love to hear them, but first I want to make something clear. I bought this building because of you. Excuse me. Your reputation in property management is exceptional, Lucas explained. The Westerly's turnaround under your leadership caught my attention. I have several other residential properties in my portfolio that could benefit from your expertise. Grace wasn't sure whether to feel flattered or objectified. So the building was just a means to recruit me? Lucas shook his head. The building is a solid investment, but meeting the person behind its success was certainly a motivation. He smiled, that same genuine smile that had caught her attention the day before. Now, tell me about these improvements you're proposing. For the next hour, Grace outlined her vision for the Westerly, from energy efficiency upgrades to enhanced community spaces. Lucas listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that revealed his own expertise in property development. These are excellent proposals, Lucas said when she finished. I'd like to approve the budget for all of them. Grace stared at him in disbelief. All of them. That's nearly $2 million in improvements. Worth every penny if they deliver the returns you've projected, Lucas replied confidently. I trust your judgment, Grace. Their meeting concluded with Lucas inviting Grace to tour some of his other properties the following week. Strictly professional, of course, he added with a small smile that referenced their exchange from the day before. Despite her reservations about working closely with an owner she found distractingly attractive, Grace agreed. His business acumen was impressive, and the opportunity to implement her ideas with proper funding was too good to pass up over the next few weeks. Grace found herself spending more time with Lucas than she had anticipated. Their professional relationship quickly developed into a productive partnership as they visited his other properties, discussing potential improvements and management strategies. What surprised Grace most was Lucas's genuine interest in the residents' experiences. Unlike other property owners she'd worked with, he didn't view the buildings merely as financial assets, but as communities. My first apartment after college was a nightmare, Lucas explained as they walked through one of his older buildings. The management company treated residents like inconveniences rather than customers. I promised myself that if I ever owned properties, I'd prioritize the people living in them. Grace glanced at him curiously. For someone who made his fortune in tech security, you have a surprising passion for real estate, Lucas laughed. You've been researching me. Basic due diligence, Grace replied with a small smile, though the articles didn't mention you started with nothing. The rags to riches narrative makes for better press, Lucas admitted. But yes, I built Irving Innovations from scratch, sold it last year to focus on more tangible investments. He gestured to the building around them. Like this. As they continued working together, Grace found her strict professional boundary starting to blur. Lucas was unlike any billionaire she might have imagined, grounded, thoughtful, and refreshingly direct. Despite her rule against fraternizing with residents or owners, she couldn't deny her growing attraction to him. One evening, after a particularly productive meeting with contractors at the Westerly, Lucas invited Grace to dinner. To celebrate our progress, he clarified, seeing her hesitation. The rooftop garden expansion is ahead of schedule and under budget. That deserves recognition. Grace considered declining but found herself nodding instead. One dinner, professional colleagues celebrating a project milestone. Lucas grinned. Exactly. I know a quiet place nearby, great food. No photographers looking for the elusive Lucas Irving to splash across business magazines. The restaurant was indeed discreet, a small Italian place with private booths and subdued lighting. As they settled in, Grace realized this was the first time she'd seen Lucas truly relaxed, without a laptop or property plans between them. "So," Lucas said after they'd ordered, "I know Grace Jenkins, the exceptional property manager. Tell me about Grace outside of work." Grace took a sip of her wine. "Not much to tell, my job keeps me busy." "Everyone has a story," Lucas pressed gently. "What brought you into property management?" Grace considered deflecting again but found herself answering honestly. "My grandmother owned a small apartment building in Queens. I grew up helping her collect rent, handle maintenance requests, listen to tenant concerns. She taught me that managing property is really about managing relationships." She smiled at the memory. "After college, I worked for a corporate management firm, but I missed the personal connection my grandmother emphasized." "That explains your approach," Lucas said thoughtfully. "You treat the Westerly like it's your building." "In many ways it is," Grace admitted. "I've put so much of myself into it over the years." "That's what impressed me most when I was researching properties to acquire," Lucas said. "The reviews from residents mentioned you by name. That's rare." As dinner progressed, their conversation drifted further from work. Grace learned about Lucas's childhood in a small town upstate, his scholarship to MIT, and the security software he developed in his dorm room that eventually became the foundation of his company. "Enough about me," Lucas said after sharing a story about his first failed investment. "What about you?" "Anyone special in your life?" Grace shook her head. "My last relationship ended about 2 years ago. He couldn't understand why I'd take calls from residents at 10 p.m. about leaky faucets." "His loss," Lucas said simply, holding her gaze a moment longer than necessary. By the time they finished dessert, Grace realized 3 hours had passed, and they'd barely mentioned work. The evening had felt remarkably like a date, a thought that both thrilled and concerned her. Outside the restaurant, Lucas hailed a taxi for her. "Thank you for joining me tonight, Grace." "It was." He paused, searching for the right word, refreshing to talk about something other than property values and renovation schedules. "It was," Grace agreed, surprised by her reluctance to end the evening. "Thank you for dinner." As the taxi pulled away, Grace found herself analyzing every moment of their interaction. Lucas was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in her as a person, not just a valuable employee. But he was also her boss, essentially, and a resident in her building. The professional complications were significant. The following morning, Grace arrived at her office to find a small potted herb plant on her desk with a note. "For the rooftop garden, thanks for an enjoyable evening." The gesture was thoughtful but professionally appropriate, exactly the kind of balance that made Lucas so dangerous to her carefully maintained boundaries. Over the next month, Grace and Lucas settled into a rhythm of working together on various property improvements. They maintained professional decorum during business hours, but Grace couldn't ignore the growing tension between them, the lingering glances, the casual touches that sent electricity through her. The way Lucas always seemed to bring her favorite coffee when they had early meetings. The situation came to a head when a severe storm hit the city, causing flooding in the Westerly's basement. Grace received the emergency call at midnight and rushed to the building to coordinate with maintenance staff. To her surprise, Lucas was already there when she arrived, helping the maintenance team move storage items to higher ground. "What are you doing here?" Grace asked, stunned to see the billionaire owner knee-deep in water, his expensive pants rolled up to his calves. Lucas looked up, equally surprised to see her. "I was awake when the alarm system notified me about the flooding. Seemed faster to come down and help rather than wait for updates." For the next several hours, they worked alongside the maintenance team to mitigate the damage. By dawn, the immediate crisis was under control, though cleanup would take days. "You should go home and get some rest," Lucas told Grace as they stood in the lobby, both exhausted and disheveled. "The restoration company will be here soon." Grace shook her head. I need to be here when they arrive, coordinate access to affected areas. Always the dedicated property manager, Lucas said with a tired smile. At least let me get you some breakfast. You've been working for hours. They ended up in Lucas's penthouse, the only place in the building guaranteed to have hot water for coffee. As Grace stood in his kitchen, watching him prepare a simple breakfast of toast and eggs, the surreal nature of the situation struck her. "This isn't how I imagined seeing your apartment for the first time," she commented, looking around at the surprisingly modest furnishings. For a billionaire, Lucas lived with minimal ostentation. "How did you imagine it?" Lucas asked, sliding a plate in front of her. Grace felt her cheeks warm. "I just meant professionally, for a maintenance inspection or something." Lucas's eyes held hers. "Grace, I think we need to address the situation between us." Her heart raced. "What situation?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," Lucas said gently. "The fact that I find you incredibly attractive and fascinating. The fact that I think about you constantly when we're not working together. The fact that I'm fairly certain you feel something too, but your professional ethics are holding you back." Grace set down her coffee cup carefully. "Lucas, I can't deny there's an attraction, but you're not just any resident or property owner. The power dynamic is complicated." "I understand that," he acknowledged, "and I respect your boundaries, but I also believe that when something this rare comes along, it deserves consideration." He moved closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I've never met anyone like you, Grace. Someone who challenges me, impresses me, makes me laugh. Someone who sees me as just Lucas, not the billionaire." Grace's resolve wavered. "What are you suggesting? Let me take you to dinner again. Not as colleagues celebrating a milestone, as two people who want to know each other better." His blue eyes were earnest. "If you decide after that the professional complications are too great, I'll respect your decision completely." Grace knew she should decline. But after seeing Lucas roll up his expensive pants to save residents' belongings in the middle of the night, she found her perspective shifting. This wasn't just her boss or a wealthy resident, this was a man whose actions consistently demonstrated integrity and compassion. "One dinner," she agreed finally, "but somewhere very private. The last thing I need is for residents to see us together and start gossiping." Lucas's smile was worth the risk. "I know just the place." The place turned out to be Lucas's beach house in the Hamptons, where he personally prepared dinner while Grace explored the modest but beautiful property. "This isn't what I expected," Grace admitted as they sat on the deck overlooking the ocean, enjoying the simple but delicious meal he'd made. "When you said beach house, I pictured something ostentatious," Lucas supplied with a grin. "I save that for my secret volcano lair." Grace laughed, relaxing for the first time in weeks. Away from the Westerly and the city, the professional boundaries that had constrained their relationship seemed less significant. "My father was a carpenter," Lucas explained, looking out at the water. "When I made my first real money, I bought this place and renovated it myself, using the skills he taught me. It keeps me grounded when the business world gets too abstract." "You're full of surprises, Lucas Irving," Grace said softly. As the evening progressed, their conversation deepened. Lucas spoke about the loneliness that often accompanied his success, while Grace shared her fears about sacrificing too much of her personal life for her career. When Lucas walked her to the guest room later that night, he had insisted she stay rather than drive back to the city late. They paused outside the door. "Thank you for coming here tonight," Lucas said, his voice low. "For giving us a chance to explore whatever this is between us." Grace looked up at him, her professional defenses finally lowered. "I'm glad I did." Lucas leaned down slowly, giving her time to step away if she wanted. Instead, Grace raised herself on her toes to meet him. Their first kiss was gentle and questioning, a careful exploration. The second was not. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I should say good night before I forget all about being a gentleman." Grace nodded, though part of her wanted to pull him into the room with her. "Good night, Lucas." In the morning, they drove back to the city, discussing how to navigate their changing relationship. They agreed to keep things private until they were certain of where it was heading, particularly given Grace's position at the Westerly. Over the next few months, their relationship blossomed in the spaces between their professional interactions. Weekends at the beach house, quiet dinners in Lucas's penthouse, cultural events in neighboring cities where they wouldn't be recognized. Lucas introduced Grace to his small circle of trusted friends, while she brought him to family dinners where he was treated like any other boyfriend, not a billionaire businessman. For both of them, these glimpses into each other's private worlds were precious. 6 months into their relationship, Lucas proposed a solution to their professional dilemma. "I've been thinking about restructuring my property management team," he told Grace one evening as they sat in his living room reviewing renovation plans for another building. Creating a director position to oversee all residential properties in the portfolio, Grace looked up from the blueprints. "That makes sense given the number of acquisitions this year. I'd like you to consider taking the role," Lucas continued. "You'd be reporting directly to my COO, not to me." "It would create some professional distance between us." Grace considered the proposal carefully. "Would I still be hands-on with the Westerly? You'd oversee the new property manager there, but your focus would be broader," Lucas explained. "It's an opportunity to implement your vision across multiple properties with the resources to make significant improvements." "And us?" Grace asked quietly. Lucas took her hand. "It would allow us to be more open about our relationship. No more sneaking around, no more ethical complications." The opportunity was professionally exciting, but Grace hesitated. "I don't want anyone thinking I earned the position because of our relationship." "Your reputation in the industry speaks for itself," Lucas assured her. "The position would have been yours regardless, but I understand your concern." He thought for a moment. What if the promotion came with a 6-month probationary period, assessed by the COO, not me? That would silence any skeptics. Grace nodded slowly. "That could work, but I'd want to be involved in hiring my replacement at the Westerly." "Of course," Lucas agreed. "No one knows the building or the residents better than you do." 2 weeks later, after multiple interviews with Lucas's executive team that he deliberately absent from, Grace accepted the director position. The transition was smooth, with residents at the Westerly expressing both congratulations on her promotion and sadness at her day-to-day departure. With the professional complications addressed, Lucas and Grace finally went public with their relationship. To Grace's relief, the response from residents and colleagues was overwhelmingly positive. Many admitted they had suspected something between the two for months. As Grace's probationary period came to a successful conclusion, Lucas suggested they celebrate with a weekend at the beach house. What Grace didn't know was that Lucas had spent weeks planning the perfect proposal, with the help of her family and friends. When they arrived at the beach house, Grace was surprised to find it transformed with subtle lighting and flowers. Lucas led her to the deck where they'd had their first real date, now set with candles and champagne. "What's all this?" Grace asked, though her racing heart suspected the answer. Lucas took both her hands in his. "1 year ago, you broke your own rule and agreed to have dinner with me. That night changed everything for me, Grace." He dropped to one knee, producing a vintage emerald ring. "You've seen me at my best and my worst, from negotiating $1 million deals to wading through floodwater in the middle of the night. You love me for who I am, not what I own. Will you marry me?" Tears filling her eyes, Grace nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." As Lucas slipped the ring onto her finger, cheers erupted from inside the house. Grace turned to see her family and closest friends emerging onto the deck, followed by Lucas's inner circle. "I hope you don't mind the audience," Lucas said, rising to embrace her. "I wanted everyone who loves you to be here." The impromptu engagement party lasted well into the night, with Grace's grandmother pulling Lucas aside at one point. "I knew you were special the first time Grace mentioned you," the elderly woman told him. She said you treated the maintenance staff with the same respect you showed to business partners. That's when I knew you might be worthy of my granddaughter. 1 year later, Grace and Lucas were married in a ceremony at the beach house, with the Westerly's longtime doorman serving as one of the groomsmen. They honeymooned in places where Lucas's name meant nothing, allowing them to simply be two people in love. Upon their return, they moved into a new home, neither Lucas's penthouse nor Grace's apartment, but a place they had chosen together. Lucas continued expanding his business interests beyond tech into sustainable development, while Grace's property management innovations earned industry recognition. On their second anniversary, they broke ground on their most meaningful joint project, a foundation dedicated to creating affordable housing managed with the same care and attention typically reserved for luxury properties. From your grandmother's small building in Queens to this, Lucas remarked as they watched the construction begin. You've stayed true to her philosophy. Grace squeezed his hand. Managing relationships, not just properties, it works for buildings. She smiled up at him, and for billionaires too, apparently. Lucas laughed, pulling her close. Best investment I ever made was buying that penthouse at the Westerly. Who knew the real value would be meeting the property manager? As they stood watching their foundation's first project take shape, Grace reflected on how far they'd come from that first encounter in the Westerly's lobby. She had broken her rule against fraternizing with residents, but in doing so, had found something far more valuable than professional boundaries. A partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and deep love. For Lucas, the man who had achieved extraordinary success in business, finding Grace had brought something his wealth could never buy. Someone who saw beyond his billions to the person he truly was. Someone who challenged him, supported him, and loved him not for what he owned, but for who he was at his core. Together, they had transformed not only the Westerly and numerous other properties, but also each other's lives, proving that sometimes the most unexpected encounters can lead to the most profound connections. The building that had brought them together was just the beginning of their story, a foundation for something far more lasting than bricks and mortar.